What if you could increase your firm's profitability by more than 60% without adding a single new person? Today's guest, Miles Kailburn of Old Town Media, did precisely that, and his secret weapon was not a new sales tactic. It was simply turning his company's most powerful service inward. He shares the playbook for creating an internal service designer role that led to a massive operational transformation. This is absolutely a masterclass in finding the hidden value in your own business simply by practicing what you preach. This is Freeing the Founder. Instead of me butchering my way through this, I'm just going to read this sentence because I think it sounds really good. It sets the table, and it goes like this. Growth brings challenges like resource constraints, misalignment, and both of these things can be addressed by prioritizing resources, aligning your teams, and of course, streamlining your processes. And so the reason I reached out to you is when I think of this sentence, you come to mind.
Thank you.
This is something that I believe, A, you've either solved, or B, are in the process of solving. And in the 5 years that I've known you, I've always respected and admired your methodical approach to business because you're always constantly learning. So Miles, thanks so much. And if we could, I'll toss over to you a quick intro of who Miles is, what is OTM, what problem you solve, and if you're up for it, throw in a fun fact about Miles.
Let's do it. So, Randall, thanks for having me. My name is Miles Kailburn. I'm a co-founder here at OTM. We are a marketing and sales consultancy focused in high lifetime value segments and B2B professional services. So, I think a fun fact about me is, I don't know. Some interesting facts, I guess, are I never went to college. I found out late in life in my 40s that I have ADHD, and I am a very curious individual. So in terms of things I like to do, it's just about anything. That's me in a nutshell. So should we talk about growth constraints?
That's pretty interesting. I'm gonna squirrel.
Yeah.
Actually, I found that interesting. The ADHD. Curious your take on this. Do you see that now as a superpower, realizing this later in life?
Oh, there's a lot of scars that have turned into, I think, armor for what I do and running a company. So I see it very much as a strength, and I think it's always been an intrinsic strength, but not understanding why and how I operated really kind of made it tough to find a fit traditionally for myself, even in the agency world. I remember it's probably 7 years ago, being a co-founder of a marketing firm, but with a, technology background, as a director of IT for a school district is pretty uncommon. Or was, very uncommon. All of our peers were these eccentric, highly visionary people. And here's, me being very creative and very visionary, but in a very different, logical, pragmatic, growth-focused ways. And, I think there was just a lot of imposter syndrome to that, only to find out later in life that a lot of those creative agencies no longer exist, and most of them are led by people with technical experience because they all led development shops, and those development shops turned into digital firms. And so then it started to actually kind of unveil more of a common picture for myself. So it's just how I'm wired, and it just makes me very, very curious.
I find this very intriguing. One quick question, and then I promise you we'll transition over to the topic at hand. Why do you label this as a strength? I agree with you, by the way. I'm not challenging it, but in your words, why do you see it as a strength?
Pattern recognition. I would say pattern recognition, second order thinking, are two huge gifts that I have. A lot of people do, and probably comes with a bit of ADHD as well. But um, just having the ability to see things much further out, and connecting those dots, it's definitely the probably the highest value skill I bring to our leadership team. They have an unbelievable amount of skills that I do not have, but that is one skill that I bring to the table. I'll see things, and a year or two, 3 years down the road, and that they just don't see it, and I can help get them there, and it's got a pretty good track record of being accurate. So we'll keep
Very
it up.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good segue to topic at hand, the transition from growth to scale. I can tell you that in the 5 years that I've known you, you and I have had many conversations about this transition. Why don't you give us an update of, what OTM is contending with now in your journey as you transition from growth to
Yeah.
scalability?
So our journey is, well, I guess to take a quick step back, we accidentally started our company, 18 years ago, and then kept going. So our timeline's a little unique. The the growth phase for us was incredibly long because we had to grow, into our 20s and out of our 20s and figure out what to do and how to do things and all that. So, I would say over the last 5, 6 years, the time I've known you, a lot of that time has been shoring up our growth stage, looking at product market fit, looking at service design and delivery, productization of things. So all of those things were kind of validating our growth phase and stabilizing and systematizing a lot of that. And so as we've gone into our scale stage, the interesting thing around that is it's also at probably the highest volatile time in our world, in marketing and certainly in sales, with technology and all that. So I think while it's the industry has actually shifted more towards what I would consider my core competency, on the technology side. Um, I think it's amazing. And obviously, we're talking about AI and technology and automations and things like that. It's just having a much stronger place as it should in marketing. And so when we're going through the scale stage, not only are we trying to transition the company through that scale stage, but also we're having to look at, that shifts the entire makeup of skills that our team needs. So going through reskilling, upskilling, training and development for our teams, shifting people that were typically highly, you know, I don't know how to phrase it, but like bespoke creative, right? We hovered over every little nuance, as we should, to now how do we start to run more systems and larger scale aspects of what we do. It's a lot more technology focused. So how do we take those, designers, copywriters, and shift them more into technology roles and leverage and so that they can leverage and augment what they do with technology. It's been a very focused journey for us for probably 3.5 years now. But something that I think, at least from a leadership perspective and having a background in, we're primarily a web development shop first. It's all of a sudden become very relevant and very correlative.
I think I actually recall when you made a very purposeful, very intentional switch or pivot. And I don't know exactly what it was about that interaction you and I had. There was just something different about Miles. So I'm just going to use my air quotes. There was something different about you. Can you take us back to that point in time and give us a real day-to-day story that kind of manifested the friction slash challenge that culminated to well, what the problem you're trying to solve today?
Um, I think when you look in hindsight, there's a lot of turning points. So there's probably a few things that went into that shift, but um, I think on a lot of things, we've been a bigger company before. I think we're around 15 people now. We've been in the upper 20s. And really, from a team size perspective, we knew we wanted to maintain kind of a bespoke boutique size, prioritizing a high quality talent over larger team size and things like that. So I think that was a one part of that, was just looking at who did we want to be and being very comfortable with that. That then does create a lot of constraints. So how do you grow and scale while also getting smaller at the same time? And that led us down a path of how do we start to build the systems and processes to actually support that? What does it look like? And I think that's where I had this vision of I guess, how would I say it? I had a vision of customer journey work. So we had always used that in our high lifetime value segments. It's critical to a lot of the work we do. A lot of that work is around how do you design a service and what does it feel like to the team delivering it? How do we create better outcomes, better experience for them, but also how do we create better outcomes and experience for our customers? And so we had done a lot of this customer journey work, just native to marketing, and a little bit repurposed it for marketing. And then one day I just kind of sat there. I was like, why aren't we doing this for our own services? Why aren't we going back through and redesigning and developing these very specifically for different metrics of success, client experience, outcomes, all this stuff. And so I didn't have a lot of traction because that idea was probably about 18 months ahead of where the company mindset was. But I had a team member who loved that work, and she had a background in product design. And so I remember going to her and saying, hey, what if this was your role? What if you became a service designer and helped us focus on our product in air quotes, so how we deliver our services and things like that? And she said, sounds great. What does it look like? And I said, I have no idea, but we'll figure it out over the next 6 months. And she goes, all right, well, I'm currently managing accounts, so I get a lot of direct feedback real quick. What will my feedback be like? How will I know if I'm winning? I'm like, well, you won't. In 9 months, you'll know that you're doing good. And so she took on the role, and she's been in our organization for years, but she led service design for a couple of years, and still does now, but she's now our director of operations, and still leads service design. So I would say, unfortunately, I wish there was a quick go-to resource for that. It's kind of just something that we've had to build organically. She's built her little peer network in that stuff, but man, it's been such an impactful role in our organization.
This is really interesting. So if I play this back accurately, you were doing things for your clients without doing it internally. In other words, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land until you realize, oh, I can. So you did that. What was the turnaround like after the 9-month, 12-month runway? What ROI did you see?
I think we can measure, we can quantify ROI in a few ways, traditionally and non-traditionally. So I think on the non-traditional side, I guess to take a step back, it's a big shift culturally to bring somebody in who is there to help / direct how we deliver services to an internal team. So there's a lot of curiosity. There was hints of hesitation because it was something new. How could this person help but not have the subject matter expertise? And so we really had to work through it. And Jordan did an amazing job working on change management, all of that. So I think going through that process, that took a while. We had to build the muscle and the culture internally. So I would say, while our first successes came 9 months down the road, it takes a couple months to get through service design work, and then you have to implement the new processes in the next project cycle timelines, and then they have to finish so that you kind of know where you are. So that 9 month time period was pretty accurate when we started to see that feedback. You know, in the non-tangibles, or non-metric ROI aspects, I think, and these are equally as critical. We were able to cut down timelines. We were and deliver work quicker, which does eventually correlate. But that allowed our team to actually have more consistency and predictability and insight into their work, which then actually allowed us, and this is the other big one, was we actually started to, this is a little bit of a phase two, but start to use service design to actually create a better experience for our team. We started to see that the processes that they had built initially, long before service design came in, it just created a terrible environment for themselves. It was death by 1,000 tasks, and all of this, and we started to look at this. I was like, well, we could actually make your day-to-day life better and easier and simpler, and and so we prioritized that kind of in a phase two, and it really helped our team create the workload structure that best worked for them and their service lines. And so I think there's a huge success and win in creating that atmosphere through kind of a odd way through service design. But then certainly on the direct side of ROI, our net profit stabilized and probably went up, from a growth perspective, somewhere between 60 and 85%, depending on where we're at. We were able to grow past capacity without needing to add additional people. So we're able to do things more efficiently, more effectively. Our revenue by headcount grew, which you could point to as an internal metric, but as we know in professional services, revenue by headcount directly correlates to salaries. So the ability to create more upward mobility in salary growth has been a big part of that. So there's a lot of aspects there. We work with certain financial groups, and we're always trying to perform better financially, but turns out we're actually doing quite well compared to our peers. So we just keep our heads down and keep delivering work for our clients.
Miles, that's phenomenal, man. What a story. I did not anticipate that coming into this conversation. And so, when a lot of folks talk about scaling, one of the common pointers is look for tactical abilities and turn them into strengths or unique capabilities and advantages. I mean, it's right there. And it came in the form of Jordan. So kudos to you, kudos to Jordan. But,
Kudos to Jordan.
you talk about right person. That's
Just
right.
to be clear.
Right person, right seat, skills and interest.
And I think
just having gone through that
but I think also, the
Go ahead,
environment to allow for that, right? The environment for her to feel safe. And she always had, she always wanted to make sure that she was creating value. She's very team focused, all of that. But I think making sure that when you have the right people, it's also the right environment, and they have the psychological safety to know that we've never done this before, and if I knew of another firm that had this role, I'd connect you with them. And unfortunately, I don't. And but this is the path we're going down. And that a lot of that was on the front end of the technology wave. I don't think we'd been able to adapt and leverage technology as fast as we did without her. Obviously, the team has to, lead a lot of that, but the ability to have somebody as an internal resource that can help you look at restructuring services. How could we tie these in? How could we shift the delivery structure, the cadence, all of that really is not firsthand thought when you're a subject matter expert. You're great at landing messages in an inbox without being, without getting caught in spam and having high click through and high engagement rates and all that. It's a further skill to then have them think about how to package it up, how to deliver it, how to structure the internal delivery of it, the sequencing. So having that resource has been key as we shift really to a tech-focused marketing firm.
I'm glad you used psychological safety. I was hoping that you would bring that up, and you did. So thank you for reading my mind. But it sounds like for Jordan's case, you have the right person in the right seat, and you have the right environment and visionary leading the way. So that's why I say kudos to you. Let's talk about technology. I know you brushed on it and you touched on it, but what types of ways has technology helped to enable all of this?
Oh man, I think coming from a technology background and software development, developers have a stereotype that they're inherently lazy. And I'll kind of leverage that for a minute because I think there's a little bit of truth to it, but I think they're just largely efficient people. I remember having to code calendars in PHP, and for something that's a few thousand years old, they're still relatively complex to code. And you look at the JavaScript frameworks that come out, so you're like, all right, hey, we'll take one of those and I'll never write a calendar again. But what did developers do? They went to the next thing and they built the next thing. They just kept going up the ladder to create things. And so I think when we start to look at the shift in marketing and certainly in sales as well, but hugely in marketing, that speed of evolution really hasn't been there. I mean, if you look at the 75 years, you went from hand drawing art to, drawing pixels on a screen over a 60-year period. There's not a huge, and I mean, literally hand drawing pixels. Like there's not a huge shift there. And so that it was interesting watching the technology adoption speed just go 10x. I had it was normal to, people in technology that, okay, hey, it's found its way here. Great. The industry did not receive it that way. And I think there's a lot of philosophical hurdles there. And I don't mean in the use of AI, but in what we're actually set out to do. We're actually set out to grow a firm, not our firm, but our clients, and help support their growth. And so at the end of the day, it's just data. We have lots of creatives on our team, but at the end of the day, the creative is there to move a data point. It's there to move a click. It's there to, do anything like that. And so taking that approach, it is all data. So if we go off the data side and kind of back it into technology, the technology speed is just going through the roof. So that has shifted us from, our creatives are now heavily involved in the technology side. Most are leveraging, a variety of different tools, even video, photo, all that stuff. So the technology piece, it's just, it'll fundamentally shift marketing for the better. And it will also fundamentally shift, I think, who goes into marketing and why what makes them love it. That's probably dodged all of your questions, but it is where our industry is right now.
No, precisely. And I'm watching the clock. I want to make sure that I get the next questions in because you've already touched on quite a few important themes. You've touched on people, processes, and tools / the technology that and the impacts that you're referring to. But I want to go back to the dynamic that you described with between you and Jordan. And I know Jordan's not the only A player that you have in your team. You have a couple other under your belt. But I thought that was really interesting because what I've appreciated about you, Miles, and in my time knowing you, is you're acutely aware of your strengths and weaknesses. And you know you're very aware that exists to solve the founder bottleneck. And you strike me as somebody who's very aware of that issue. As you look around to other agency owners, other founders and business owners, what advice would you offer them so that the founder doesn't hinder him or herself via the founder bottleneck?
Oh man, that is a lot of entry points to that. So a few that immediately come to mind. One, know your strengths and weaknesses and double down on the strengths. Hire and delegate out the weaknesses. You'll never be great in them, and other people certainly are. That took us a little while to figure out. And the others would be, um, having the ability to replicate yourself. We you look at this when we hire into like VAs or different things. There's always this, oh, you got to replicate yourself. That didn't work for us. What we had to do is we had to change how we did things so that it was replicatable. And that was a learning debacle for us. We tried all the things. We went the EA route and had a great one, but it just didn't work because nothing we did was consistent and replicatable. So one of the biggest things we see, and you see it a lot in professional services, especially when it's more consulting focused, but it'll cross into other segments. How can you systematize and productize a lot of what you're doing so that 80% of it is consistent, the same, and 20% of it is maybe just the feel, the ambiance, the emotion, and the nuances to the delivery. But getting that 80% consistency, and that's been a long journey, even just culturally, historically in our company to get to that point. It can be looked at as overly productizing, removing value. The other thing that it does, which I don't agree with any of that, but the other piece that it does is it allows you to actually have a best practice. You can consistently train and develop and deliver the work at a consistent level. When you start to bring on additional people, we found this when early on, you have a SEO strategist and they're great. There's not an SOP to be found, but man, they can deliver. And then you hire the next one and okay, it's a junior. The quality of the work largely is just the average of the two. The junior doesn't magically deliver at the quality of the senior. And yes, we can go through reviews and some of this stuff, but you actually start to, it just becomes the law of averages. And so what we found was if we can look at how do we solve common problems consistently with common solutions, and there's custom work outside of that, those start to become best practices. We can train and onboard team members to those practices. They can adopt those best practices as their own, and then they can continue evolving and managing those. So I would say the ability to consistently scale and grow comes from the ability to actually be able to consistently delegate.
Miles, this is easy to prescribe to other founders, to other agency owners, a lot harder to do. I wouldn't mind just asking you how you prefer to do it in your own shop. How are you able to keep alignment while still keeping the focus on the core focus while getting out of the way and staying out of the way? Like what's your secret?
There's no secret. It's a village. One, I think making sure that your team is bought into it. So we have an operations team that kind of helps lead all of this, and Jordan is a part of that. And Jordan's role, I don't know if it's formal or informal, but she has recently, in the last couple of quarters of planning, been the bulldog of scope and prioritization. And so we set out our quarterly rocks, our quarterly projects for that stuff. And she bulldogs it because, I've got, new ideas all the time. Things come up that seem urgent. and having somebody that can help prioritize in ultimately the team resources has been really, really key. And chances are it's probably not you as the founder. The ability to self-regulate, self-govern, self-manage, chances are is probably not a core focus, and nor should it. You should be out there looking at opportunities, and a lot of times the group decides, yes, let's swap out this priority for this new one, and other times it just gets backlogged into the next quarter, as it should. So I think having a team that is on board with that and recognizes the constraints, time tracking and resource management also help to give some logical boundaries. But I also think there's got to be some awareness as a founder to what does it take to do this successfully. Can we add another 3 things and do it successfully? Most founders I know, they underestimate the time, but we can get through this real quick. But then we have the highest expectations and requirements for what this should be. And I've come to more so embrace the fact that I want this done right. I want it done for the long haul. And I'm also the one that usually drags it on because I want it to be done the way I want it to be done. So having some recognition of scope and priorities is key.
That is so cool. In my mind, just listening to you, I was trying to take notes so that I could summarize what are the 4 key tips, if you will, that Miles has shared with me in this one conversation. I got down to resources, alignment, processes, addressing the founder bottleneck, and you threw a 5th one in there. You used the word awareness. I'm going to use the word leadership. And Miles, it sounds to me that you are a leader through and through. Hence, you wouldn't have psychological safety in your shop. So again, kudos to you. I'm going to give you the final word. If you were sitting across from yourself, a Miles Kailburn who was, 5 years, 10 years younger, what would you tell that Miles, that version of Miles, as that version of Miles is preparing to scale?
I think first and foremost, embrace your own identity. Just know who you are, and embrace it, and don't question it. Don't try and be something else, and build what you want. I know, I think we get into our own minds too much, and in hindsight, the gut's usually correct, and just go with it. You'll change it later if you need.
There you have it. Miles Kailburn, Old Town Media. Miles, you're a rock star and a role model to me. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Randall.